So September 16th, 2025, a really critical new phase kicks off in Gaza. Israel launches this main phase ground offensive right into Gaza City.
Operation Gideon's Chariots the second, they're calling it.
Exactly. And this is happening against, well, just a devastating backdrop. We're talking awful humanitarian conditions, a famine officially confirmed as man-made by UN experts, and this really public split inside Israel's own leadership.
And perhaps the most striking timing element this offensive starts the very same day a UN commission releases findings saying Israel has committed genocide in Gaza.
Welcome to NationScope Podcast. Join us as we dive into the latest headlines, breaking stories, and critical events shaping America and the world.
From politics to culture, economy to tech, we try to analyze the news that really matters.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the specific escalation, Israel's big push into Gaza City.
Our mission is to really unpack it all, the military side, the stated goals, but also the catastrophic impact on civilians.
And the internal Israeli fights, the global reaction, it's complex. We'll explore how this operation, launching right as that UN report dropped, hasn't just changed the conflict, but it's testing alliances, shattering diplomatic norms.
The stakes feel incredibly high.
They really do. And the human cost, it's almost unimaginable. So let's get into it. That name first, Operation Gideon's Chariots the second. What's the significance there?
What's fascinating, the name itself is clearly strategic messaging. Gideon's Chariots references a biblical story, suggesting a righteous struggle, and adding to implies, unfinished business.
Right.
It seems designed to project determination, bolster support back home, even as the stated military goals are about dismantling Hamas infrastructure and getting hostages back.
So it's got layers. Okay, the offensive itself.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, September 16th, IDF moves in, ground and air. And this follows a night residents described as just relentless, heavy bombardment. Some said it was the most terrifying they'd seen in nearly 2 years of war.
And the scale is huge. We're hearing about multiple IDF divisions involved, the 162nd, the 98th already advancing, the 36th joining later.
Yeah, tens of thousands of soldiers, plus another 60,000 reservists called up, on top of the 70,000 already there.
Massive mobilization.
And the tactics, intense air support, artillery. Reports mentioned 5 waves of airstrikes hitting over 500 targets before the ground troops even went in.
And there was that mention of repurposing old M113 armored personnel carriers packed with explosives.
Right, for destroying infrastructure. It points to the intensity.
It does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you see this really contradictory rhetoric coming out of Israel.
How so?
Well, the military, for international ears, emphasizes precision, right? Trying to stick to the script of international law.
Okay.
But then you have political leaders, like the defense minister, reportedly posting things like, Gaza is burning, vowing to strike with an iron fist. That's for the domestic audience demanding, a decisive win.
So a split message depending on the audience.
Exactly. And this duality, it raises an important question. How does that square with claims of precision? It actually feeds into what international bodies, like that UN commission, we're looking at regarding intent.
Yeah, those kinds of statements were cited in the UN report as evidence of genocidal intent, weren't they?
Precisely. It makes the claims of surgical strikes harder to sustain, legally and diplomatically.
Which brings us to the situation inside Israel. Because this decision, invading Gaza City, it wasn't unanimous, was it?
Far from it. Sources suggest a really profound public split between Netanyahu's government and the IDF's senior command.
Public. That's unusual.
Very. The top brass, led by the Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, reportedly had deep misgivings. They warned it could be a death trap for soldiers and put the hostages in even greater danger.
A death trap. Strong words.
And there were accounts of Zamir actually yelling at ministers in a security cabinet meeting, telling them, take the deal, meaning push for a negotiated ceasefire to get the hostages out.
Wow. So the military was pushing for diplomacy.
In that instance, yes, prioritizing hostage release and soldier safety over this specific offensive. But Netanyahu apparently shut it down sharply.
Oh.
With that line, this isn't an army that has a country, it's a country that has an army, basically asserting political control over military judgment.
That's a stark reminder of the power dynamics.
It is. And it's fascinating because this kind of public breakdown is rare. It really suggests the military felt the political directive was, frankly, reckless.
Driven by political calculations rather than military assessment.
That's what the sources imply, yeah, that political needs might be overriding professional military advice on the risks involved.
And central to this whole internal fight, the hostages.
Absolutely. The fate of the 48 remaining Israeli hostages, though, tragically, sources indicate maybe only 20 or so are thought to be alive, is right at the heart of it.
And the families, they're not staying quiet.
No, they've been incredibly vocal.
Yeah.
They argue this military pressure, this offensive, actually endangers their loved ones. They accuse the government of sacrificing the hostages for political goals.
There are ongoing protests, right? Outside the prime minister's residence.
A permanent encampment, yes. You hear quotes like the one from Einav Zangaker, whose son Matan is captive.
Mm-hmm.
She said Netanyahu is not a worthy prime minister if he sends soldiers in while hostages are being used as human shields.
It puts the government in a really tough spot domestically.
It does, and it raises a fundamental question. What even is victory for Israel here? Is it just about eliminating Hamas, or is it about bringing your captured citizens home?
The government obviously argues the military pressure is the only way.
That's their public stance, yes. That pressure is needed to compel Hamas. But critics, and many analysts looking at this, suggest political survival plays a huge role.
You mean Netanyahu needing to keep his far-right coalition happy and his own legal issues?
Those factors are widely seen as contributing to decisions that prolong the war, potentially overshadowing the hostage issue for some in leadership.
Let's shift focus to the ground, to Gaza City itself. What was the experience like for civilians when this began?
Just unrelenting terror, based on eyewitness accounts. People describe nonstop explosions, airstrikes, artillery, drones, helicopters coming from everywhere.
Constant bombardment.
One resident, Essam Abu Amir, told reporters it felt like the whole city was under fire. The intensity was apparently so severe that the concussions were felt miles away, even in Tel Aviv.
And casualties.
Immediately started mounting. Shifa Hospital in Gaza City reported getting 34 bodies and over 90 wounded just in the initial hours. Across Gaza, the death toll hit 68 by dawn, according to Palestinian health officials. And rescue efforts were incredibly difficult, with the bombing still going on.
Alongside the bombing, there were evacuation orders.
Yes, the IDF declared Gaza City a dangerous combat zone, telling residents to head south to Mawasi, which was designated a humanitarian zone.
Leading to chaos.
A terrified scramble is how reports described it. Thousands fleeing down coastal roads. But here's where it gets complicated, the numbers.
Discrepancies.
Big time. The IDF claimed over 370,000 evacuated. But the UN's estimate was much lower. Maybe 220,000 fled northern Gaza in the month prior, suggesting potentially 800,000 people, including nearly 500,000 children, might still have been in the city when the offensive began.
Wow, that's a huge difference. What does that tell us?
Well, it's sort of part of an information war, isn't it? Higher numbers fit the IDF narrative of successfully clearing civilians. Lower numbers highlight just how many non-combatants were potentially trapped.
And why couldn't people leave? Or why wouldn't they?
For many, it was impossible. People cited the cost reports mentioned, up to $240 for a vehicle ride, which is unthinkable for most families there.
Plus, where were they supposed to go? Mawasi.
Exactly. And Mawasi, according to the UN and aid groups, was already dangerously overcrowded, lacking basic sanitation, shelter, food, water, and it wasn't even safe. It had been hit by Israeli airstrikes before.
So no good options.
None. Many people, exhausted from being displaced multiple times already, apparently just chose fatalism. They'd rather risk dying at home than flee to another place that felt just as dangerous and offered no real refuge.
And this offensive is hitting an area where famine was already happening.
Yes, and this is absolutely crucial. The IPC, that's the Global Authority on Food Security, had officially declared famine. IPC Phase 5 the worst possible level in Gaza City before this operation started.
Not just risk of famine, but actual confirmed famine.
Confirmed famine. And UN experts were explicit. They called it man-made, the direct and predictable result of a siege, and even the deliberate weaponization of food assistance.
Which has huge legal implications.
Massive. Under international humanitarian law, intentionally using starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime. The UN finding directly implicates Israel based on their investigation.
And the human cost of that famine.
Already devastating before the offensive.
Yep.
Hundreds dead from malnutrition, reports said, including at least 145 children. Nearly 30% of young children in Gaza City were acutely malnourished.
Launching a ground war into that.
It raises profound questions, doesn't it? What does it mean, legally and morally, to launch a major offensive into an area where, according to UN findings, the invading power is already committing the war crime of starvation?
And alongside the famine, there's the destruction of the city itself.
Yes, reports mentioned over 50 high-rise towers demolished just before the ground assault. Something like 97% of schools damaged or destroyed over the course of the war, the healthcare system collapsing. Remaining hospitals in Gaza City were at imminent risk,
Basic supplies blocked, too, like cooking gas.
blocked for over 5 months, according to aid groups. People were forced to burn plastic, furniture, whatever they could find just to cook or stay warm. The systematic destruction of infrastructure, the high-rises, the schools, the hospitals. Experts have a term for this: herbicide.
Herbicide.
Yeah, the deliberate killing of the city. The idea isn't just tactical military gains. It's about destroying the physical and social fabric, making the place fundamentally unlivable.
So people can't return. No normalcy possible.
Exactly. It prevents any kind of return to normal life, makes future Palestinian administration incredibly difficult, if not impossible. It risks turning Gaza City into a permanent wasteland. And as you said, Mawasi, the supposed safe zone, offers no real alternative.
This whole situation, the offensive, the famine, the internal splits obviously drew a lot of international attention.
Intense attention
Mm.
and condemnation.
Mm.
Especially with the timing, the offensive launching simultaneously with that UN genocide report and a high-profile U.S. visit.
Let's talk about that UN report first, released the same day the tanks rolled in.
Right. The UN's Independent International Commission of Inquiry, their conclusion was stark. Israel has committed genocide in Gaza.
Meeting the criteria under the Genocide Convention.
They found evidence meeting 4 out of the 5 criteria. And crucially, they cited what they saw as clear evidence of genocidal intent. Dola Specialis, pointing directly to public statements by senior Israeli officials. President Herzog, Netanyahu, Gallant.
Wow. That's not just criticism, that's a formal legal finding by a UN body.
Precisely. And it puts legal obligations on the 153 countries signed up to the Genocide Convention. They're obligated to prevent and punish genocide. This could lead to sanctions, arms embargoes, more action in international courts.
How did Israel respond?
They categorically rejected it.
Yeah.
Called the report distorted and false.
Okay, so while this is happening, the U.S. Secretary of State is visiting. What was the U.S. approach?
It seemed like a dual-track strategy, according to reports. Publicly, it was all unwavering support for Israel. On the invasion itself, the message was reportedly, it's their war. Many analysts saw that as basically a green light.
But privately?
Privately, sources say the secretary was issuing urgent warnings, saying time was running out for a negotiated deal, maybe only days and maybe a few weeks, hinting at some kind of managed escalation.
A managed escalation? That sounds risky.
Very. And it raises questions about how effective that strategy could be, especially given the internal Israeli divisions pushing against a deal.
So it looked like the U.S. was providing cover for an operation it perhaps didn't fully want.
That's how some analysts interpreted it, yes. That the U.S. ended up looking complicit in an action that undermined its own stated preference for negotiation, an action drawing widespread condemnation.
And the condemnation was widespread, wasn't it? Beyond the UN.
Oh, yeah. The UK reportedly called the assault utterly reckless. The EU urged a halt. Even Germany, a very strong ally, suspended arms sales.
What about in the region?
Egypt reportedly started referring to Israel as the enemy in official statements. Turkey condemned Israel's expansionist and genocidal policy. There was an emergency summit of Arab and Muslim nations denouncing the actions.
So across the board, really.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Even close allies were voicing strong opposition. It really highlights how isolated Israel became on the diplomatic stage because of this offensive.
Looking forward, then, what does this mean? Israel pushing deeper into Gaza City. Does it risk becoming a forever war?
That's the major concern analysts are raising. There seems to be no clear exit strategy, no credible day-after plan for Gaza, beyond Israel maintaining long-term security control.
An Israeli military graphic even showed them controlling most of the Strip indefinitely.
Reportedly, yes. And the stated goal of completely eradicating Hamas, well, history shows that's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, against movements deeply embedded in a society.
And the conditions being created, the destruction, the famine, the displacement.
Ironically, they create almost perfect conditions for a regenerated insurgency. You could end up with the Israeli military just policing a desperate hostile population living in rubble.
So is pursuing this kind of total military victory actually rational, or is it driven by something else? Politics? Emotion?
That's the core question critics are asking. Does this path ultimately undermine Israel's own long-term security, even if it satisfies short-term political demands?
And diplomacy seems completely sidelined now.
Effectively, yes. The timing of the offensive basically killed any remaining chance for a negotiated deal at that moment. Remember the Israeli airstrike in Doha just days before.
Targeting Hamas officials during ceasefire talks.
Exactly. Qatar called it an attack on the principle of mediation itself. It sent a message that negotiation wasn't the priority.
So the whole framework for mediation has collapsed.
It largely appears so. The post-Oslo framework, the ability of the international community to mediate effectively, it seems broken. Israel's actions suggest a belief, perhaps, that they can act with impunity, shielded by the U.S. political veto, despite any unhappiness voiced by Washington or others.
Which leads back to Israel's isolation.
Deep isolation. The combination of the Doha strike, the Gaza City offensive, the UN genocide finding, it's pushed Israel into arguably its most isolated position ever.
Netanyahu even acknowledged it, didn't he? Tried to spin it as becoming a self-reliant super Sparta.
Yes, trying to frame isolation as strength. But it's a dangerous position.
So, a final thought maybe for you, the listener. The international response seems to be shifting. Less mediation, more legal condemnation, unilateral actions like arms suspensions. What does that shift mean?
What does it mean for the region's future? For international law itself? Does it increase the risk of wider conflict? Critics inside Israel warned of an eternal siege. The current path seems incredibly perilous, moving further away from any diplomatic off-ramps.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've looked at a situation where a massive military offensive is layered onto a humanitarian catastrophe, deep internal divisions in Israel, and just unprecedented global condemnation. It's pushing the region towards a really unknown, dangerous future.
It really is.
Something to consider, how history is being written right now. What role does international law, or maybe its failure, play in conflicts like this? What does it mean when diplomacy and basic humanitarian norms seem to be crumbling? It's a situation demanding our continued attention, definitely.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to Nation Scope Podcast, where we analyze the stories shaping America and the world. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.